German culture, we are often not very aware of this basic human dimension, which could be due to the ideal that all people should be equal and have equal rights. The following video is about the topic of power distance. Again, it is not about cultures that have either a low or a high power distance, but about tendencies within cultures. So it is not about pigeonholing or two opposing sides, but about an orientation on a dimension with extreme values. In cultures with a high power distance, in which power is seen as natural and desired, we will certainly also find tendencies, perspectives and actions that indicate a low power distance. Likewise, in cultures with a tendency towards a low power distance, we will also find areas in which a way of thinking prevails that is based on a high power distance. Administrations or the armed forces are examples of the existence of systems with steep hierarchies in a cultural environment that is characterized by a low power distance. So it is not a question of either or, but more a question of both and, with an orientation towards one side or towards the other side. Even if we don't emphasize it much, dependencies and thus power relationships between people are omnipresent in our societies. Parents are in a position of power over their children, as are teachers over their pupils, bosses over their employees, or professors over their students. If dependencies and power relationships are normal in all human societies, what is the cultural dimension of power distance all about? With this cultural dimension, we primarily seek to describe the generally accepted distribution of power and the way in which a society deals with real existing inequalities. This way of dealing with power can be seen throughout all of the previous examples, such as in the emotional distance between bosses and employees, in the behavior of family members towards each other, in the position of teachers in the educational system, but also in forms of government and social conditions. Let's continue with a comparison. In the middle, we take aspects that exist in cultures with tendency towards low and high power distance. On the left side, we can see how cultures with a tendency towards low power distance deal with each other, and on the right side, how cultures with a tendency towards high power distance deal with each other. I've selected the following aspects for comparison in this video. Dealing with inequality, titles and status, appearance, status symbols, school and education, work. We could of course look at many other aspects and areas, namely what this cultural dimension means for work in administration, in health and care, in the business world, or more deeply in school and education. You can find this information on your learning platform or in the seminar. So, low power distance means that the inequality between individuals should be as small as possible. People who are more powerful try to meet other people on an equal footing and try to appear less powerful. If the boss or professor were to flaunt their power with status symbols such as, a golden Rolex watch or a particularly fancy car, this would be met with disapproval probably. Parents and children theoretically have the same rights, and children are allowed to contradict their parents and, for example, say no if they don't want something. Pupils take an active part in lessons and ask questions when things are unclear. Children's tendency to try things out and experiment is supported by parents. Early independence is idealized, and employees are expected to recognize and carry out tasks independently, to think for themselves and make suggestions for improvements, to help make decisions and to actively participate. A high power distance means that people perceive inequality as being natural. Inequality is expected and desired. People in positions of power try to appear impressive, powerful and authoritative. This is expressed, for example, in their posture, in their clothing, or the way they speak to others. Status symbols such as an expensive cell phone, branded sunglasses or a large car are expected and very popular. Children are first taught to show respect and obedience to parents. Older people, teachers and people in positions of power, they are to be respected. Teachers lead the lessons and students generally only speak when they're asked. Dependencies between people become more apparent and mutual help is expected. In this respect, children are helped rather than encouraged to experiment and try things out. Independence is not nearly as important a value as in the low power distance culture. Employees are accepted to carry out orders and commands thoroughly, help their colleagues and show respect and obedience to their superiors. With regard to the world of work, I would like to make a direct comparison. At this point, I would like to thank Dr. Jürgen Vasella for the photos. In the first photo, you can see the office of the director of an adult education facility in Antakya, Turkey. The facility is similar to the adult education centers in Germany. The Turkish director is wearing a suit and tie and is sitting at the desk in a symmetrical posture. Upright. The decor of the desk, sideboard and the walls all match the authority of the person. We can see framed certificates, we can see awards and a flag. In front of the desk, by the way, sits the director of a German adult education center, whose office we will see in the next photo. The office of the German Adult Education Center director appears to be rather functional. There are monitors on the table and a whole series of files in the cupboards behind it. Overall, this office appears less prestigious and seems to be set up more for completing work and tasks. From this direct comparison, we can see that the directors of the respective adult education institutions fulfill their roles very differently. The cultural dimension of power distance permeates all human relationships and contacts, from the family through school and university to the world of work. Of course, this also has an impact on communication between people, on their expectations and their behavioral patterns. In the cultural dimension of time, for example, there's a question of punctuality as to who should be on time and who may have to wait and who may be even allowed to be late. For example, a student will certainly be willing to wait longer for an appointment than his professor. There's a correlation with regard to the cultural dimension of individualism and collectivism. In cultures that tend to be more collectivistic, there is usually a higher power distance in which the dependence of individuals is more likely to be enforced, while in more individualistic cultures, independence is more likely to be encouraged and expected. On YouTube, I encourage you to leave your remarks in the comments and to like and to subscribe to this channel. Thank you for your valued cooperation and feedback on the seminar and on the online learning platforms.